glad you could join me again today. We're going to continue talking about the spices in our Christian spice cupboard, but I got to thinking this week about recipes because, spices are in recipes, and I thought about all the tried and true recipes that I have. Those ones that you make when company comes, you hope will not fail, and the ones your family loves, the comfort foods that I know my kids have special ones they like to have, and so when they're here, I make them for them. Or even the ones that I can make blindfolded. When I'm too tired or too distracted, then that's going to be on the menu for tonight because I'm too tired to figure out anything else. And we all need those kinds of recipes as well. But it seems the most frequent decision we make is what's for supper. And I really find that the most annoying because I'm not really a foodie. I could be happy with a piece of bread and butter. But my husband, no, he likes a real meal on the table. So persevering in the kitchen is one of my life's challenges. But the persevering in life, the spice of perseverance, is the spice we're going to talk about today. And that demands more than a simple decision about beef or chicken. It's absolutely a must. You can skip a meal or two. Tom doesn't believe it, but you can. You'll be fine if you skip a meal or two. But if you fail to persevere, there are consequences, and it leaves a gnawing that eats away at your inner peace. Here in England, we already started this week facing another 4 weeks of lockdown, complete shutdown, and we're going to need some perseverance to make it through this pandemic. It's not over with yet. We don't know when the end is in sight. And America is facing more wrangling in politics that's dividing the country, and it's going to take a sound mind and a steady heart to move forward. But move forward, persevere, we must. And during times like these, some people just put their heads down and they push through. Others let anger overtake them and it spills out. Some fall back into their beds and just have a hard time getting back out. But I began to think about what would be the Christian attitude in the face of hard times and this need for perseverance. And I found that those three reactions really don't match up with Christ's example. When he came to earth, he came in the form of a man. He laid aside his power and he submitted to human limitations. And that had to be surely an exercise in perseverance for Christ. The Bible talks about he endured sufferings and he learned obedience through the things that he suffered. And so it's an important idea to remember that this was not an easy thing for Christ to do. But we don't see him just doggedly pushing through or allowing anger to take over or even falling into self-pity. And even when we look at the example of the Apostle Paul, he talks about being bound in an earthly body, one that limited his spiritual desires, and yet he too did not approach ministry or life in these ways. So why do we? Well, I think it's because we've been taught to push through, haven't we? To keep on keeping on. And there is a proper element of that attitude in the spice of perseverance. Because in Isaiah chapter 50 and verse 7, speaking of Jesus, the Bible says he set his face like a flint. So Jesus worked with determination toward a goal, but he wasn't being stubborn or pushing through just to prove his point. His perseverance was about attaining his God-given purpose, the salvation of our souls and the fulfilling of God's will. But our pushing through is usually based on the power of ourself, our will. We keep on because we have something to prove or we have a determination not to lose. We fear failure. We want to control our world, so we just pull the reins in tighter and tighter and we hunker down and we keep on keeping on. The anger that we've adopted or may have adopted is revealed in the frustration because we can't control our world. No one can control their world. And so we tend to lash out at people that are in our way. We're irritated by the limitations we face. And so that poor person behind the cash register or that teen that's handing you the food through the drive-through window, they get your rebuke. They get your unkindness, all because you've chosen anger to be the path that you're going to go and your way of persevering, and woe betide to anyone that gets in your way. And when we fall back into our beds, just pulling the covers over our heads, and then our lack of perseverance takes a very dangerous turn because depression and self-pity can take over, and we'll find ourselves staying too long in our pit. Everything looks too hard, it looks too confusing, it's too bleak, and we hear our minds start to say, it will never be the same, it will always be like this, and there are those never and always words which indicate that we're listening to a lie. Negative thinking will start hammering nails into our coffin as we just pine away on our beds. And that's not perseverance. It's really called pouting. Okay, so if we are supposed to doggedly push through because we want things our way, or give way to anger, or just have a big pity party, then what can we do, or how can we activate the spice of perseverance? Well, I think you'll be surprised by the actual manner in which you appropriate this spice. It takes another spice, and it's called the spice of surrender. We persevere by adding the spice of surrender. So let's go back to Jesus' example. He didn't push through, act in anger, or feel sorry for himself. He surrendered his will to the will of the Father. As he faced the cross, the most pivotal point in his ministry, look at his responses in Gethsemane. We see the drops of blood in prayer, so we know he was drawing upon the Lord. He was drawing upon the strength that he needed to face the cross, and he came to a point, and what was it? It was surrender. His words were, nevertheless, thy will be done. He surrendered, and that's what gave him the perseverance and the strength to endure the crucifixion. And when you look at the Apostle Paul, you come to his attitude. He writes about leaving everything behind, counting everything but dung, pressing forth, he says, and not with a will of determination, but with a surrender of all those things that he valued in the world, and that his goal was to win Christ, okay, to win him and be found in him. And it was a surrender that allowed him to endure the beatings and the stonings, and even be willing to go to Rome, knowing it would cost him his life. And he did these things willingly. He could persevere because he had already surrendered everything to the Lord. Well, maybe we need to think just a moment about this spice of surrender and what that really means. Let me tell you, this is not the kind of surrender where you wave a white flag and everything you own goes over to an enemy. It isn't a surrender that makes you an unworthy servant or a castaway. It isn't a surrender to failure. No, it is the total opposite. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things about surrender is that when we surrender, it has properties of richness and blessing that cannot be attained from any other spice. When we surrender, we wave our white flag to Christ. It isn't losing, it's winning. We win Christ. We win a home in heaven. We win salvation. And as we further go through life and we surrender more, as God calls us to surrender more of our life, more of our attitudes, our motives, every part of our being, with each surrender, we're going to gain strength and purpose and fulfillment. And we will win. We continue being the winner. When we surrender, we aren't losing all of our belongings. We're being filled with heavenly blessings. All the riches of heaven become ours. We're adopted. We're made friends with God. We win. When we surrender, we don't become unworthy servants or castaways. We are engrafted into the vine. We become vessels fit for the master's use. We become bondservants, one in love with his master and who share in the benefits of the family. We win. So how do we apply that to our current situation? Here's how I see it. I can moan and whine about everything that's going on. I can allow anger and frustration to rise in my heart. I can just push through with a dogged determination and an inner tightness. Or I can relax and remember that God is in control, that my times are in his hands. I can know that he's fulfilling all of his promises in me. He will not fail. Not one spot of his word will fail. And the circumstances that I face do not deter God's promises. My faith can rest and I can breathe easy. I can then use this time to examine the anger and the frustrations and the self-pity that are in my heart and surrender those weaknesses to him. And if I do, I will come through this test much stronger and better equipped for the challenges ahead. And there is more to come. We're going to need all the strength and perseverance that surrender can muster for the pandemic and for the politics. Yesterday, I was reading in my Bible and God brought more of this truth of perseverance to my heart. So I want to share with you what he showed me from Hebrews chapter 6. Verses 10 through 11 read, "For God is not unrighteous to forget your work and labor of love, which you have showed toward his name, in that ye have ministered to the saints and do minister. And we desire that every one of you show the same diligence to the full assurance of hope unto the end. Perseverance. God knows our good works. He knows what we're doing. He sees our efforts of love. So we can have those three things that we need: diligence, assurance, and hope. Let's kind of define them. Diligence means eagerness. It really has the idea of doing something without delay. And assurance means conviction and certainty. And hope means an expectation. And this is a beautiful way to look at perseverance. There is action, there's conviction, and there is an expected outcome. Verse 15 reads, "And so after he, Abraham, had patiently endured, he obtained the promise." You know, the blessing that we seek, the hope that is before us, comes after we patiently endure. The blessing is on the other side of obedience, and the blessing is on the other side of perseverance. We won't know what's on the other side until we have made it across. So we must keep our eye upon the goal. We must keep our eyes going forward and press forward with not our determination, but with an excitement and an expectation, a hope of what God is going to do. And I think you'll like the definition of endure. It means to exhibit internal and external control in a difficult circumstance, to suffer long. You know, this pandemic and this political circus do demand a lot of internal and external control, don't they? I know they do in my life. We're being required to suffer long, to be patient, to endure to the end, and the end of these things will come. And verse 19 says, "Which hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast." We have this hope in us, the hope of heaven, the hope of God's return, because this world is not our home. Our souls are anchored in Jesus, and we can endure because our anchor is sure and steadfast, meaning firm and binding and certain and definite. We have an anchor for our soul. So perseverance then is not a dogged determination. It's not a mind that's set on the things that they want, but it's a mind that's set on the expectation of God's purpose and surrendered to that purpose. Ephesians 1:11 tells us he works all things according to the purpose of his will. Everything, every moment is watered by him. Every moment is attended, so we can surrender it to him. And it isn't living a life of anger because of the circumstances. It's looking beyond the pressures of today to the promise that is sure and firm and binding with hope and assurance. And it leaves no room for us to be wailing upon our beds because there's a pressing urgency to our activity. We are to be about our Father's business, persevering patiently to the end. I saw a little Facebook thing about being under King Nebuchadnezzar. We need to be a Daniel. We need to stay where we're supposed to stay in prayer, by faith, persevering in that manner. And Hebrews chapter 10, verses 35-36, one of the favorite verses. I have many. This is one of my favorite verses that comes to me, especially when I need more patience, more perseverance. It says, "Cast not away, therefore, your confidence, which hath great recompense of reward." In other words, don't give up. Don't give up. "For ye have need of patience," or we could put the word perseverance, "that after ye have done the will of God, you might receive the promise." We win. We win through perseverance and surrender. Like salt and pepper, these two spices go together. And what is that promise that we're going to receive? Revelation 2:10 tells us, fear none of those things that ye shall suffer. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee the crown of life. That is our reward, a crown of life. I want that, don't you? We have to persevere to find that crown. So let's be patient. Let's consistently press on with a determination, a zeal, and a hope that's placed in God. Let's persevere to the end and surrender the rest to God. Don't forget to subscribe and to like. You can subscribe right down there. You can like. There's a little button for that one. There's a share. If you want to share it with someone, please do that and leave me a message. And then order a book. Remember that there are 3 books out right now. The first book is called Light That Shines. And in this one, we talked about facing anxiety. We talked about keeping perspective. We talked about 3 different types of warriors. There are 12 devotional thoughts in here. And I also added at the end of each chapter, some extra scriptures to look at, some thought questions for you to think about, so that it's not just reading. And then there's also, the second book was called Contentment and Captives. And in this book, we talked about 10 things that mentally, or 6 things I think it is, 6 that mentally strong people do, self-care for captives, keeping calm and carrying on and dealing with those types of issues. And then the third book is Build That Wall. And this is 12 devotions, again, with extra scriptures and also thought questions based on depression, and how I share a bit of the depression that I went through for several years and how the Lord brought me through that, and hopefully it can help you. And if you don't know, I'm also a children's book editor. I have a new children's book out that came out last week called Snowy Delivery. My series is called Reba and Catherine, and in this one, the girls are expecting Christmas, of course. You can tell that by the snow in the picture, but they get a most wonderful Christmas surprise, a great little snowy delivery, and they learn a lot about family love. The first story is called Messy Hair Game, and here the girls learn about obedience and forgiveness. This book is also in Spanish and in Welsh. And the other book is Grandpa's Gift. Grandpa pulls a prank on the grandmothers in this story, but he uses the girls to get it done. It's a great, fun story about family. And then The Pony Cart, which is also in Spanish, and the girls invite someone to come and play, and things just don't turn out exactly the way they wanted to do. Each of the stories also have a matching coloring book, so if you'd like to get them for like a set, it makes a great little Christmas present. So if you haven't got the new one, it's called Snowy Delivery. It's out now. All the books are available on Amazon, or if you just Google my name through Amazon, they all come up, both the children's books and the devotional books. Thank you. And I pray that you would just continue to push through in the right way with God, knowing that He's in control. We're all right. We will make it in the end. He is faithful who has promised. See you next week.